Hi, everybody. I'm David Bauer, and it was my privilege to get to write the note. And I swear to God, I could have predicted that. So we'll pretend that didn't happen. I approached Alex in Quintessence to ask if I could write something about Major Barbara because it's a play I have loved and for a long time, and I was so excited that it was here. And I got to talk to Alex about it, I think a little bit before I saw it and then after I saw it, and then I brought in a bunch of other questions that I had for him that I hadn't asked before. When we spoke, you said that this had been slated for repertory before the pandemic. And obviously, you know, everything halted. You all survived the pandemic, and Major Barbara is here. So, what is it about Major Barbara that wouldn't leave you alone, that you brought it back? And is it any different now than, in your mind, than it was when you first planned it?
Yes. We have this long list of plays that we really want to do here at Quintessence. A lot of them are written on a board, and Major Barbara has been at the top of the list for a very long time. Initially, we were going to rep it between Much Ado About Nothing, Major Barbara, and a phenomenal play called Rutherford and Son. It was going to be a 3-show rep, and luckily we weren't able to do that because I think this is the better time for this moment we're in right now for Major Barbara. I've always loved Shaw. I've always loved doing Shaw here at Quintessence. We did Arms and the Man during our 3rd season. We did St. Joan during, I think, our 5th season. We did our first musical was My Fair Lady, in which we illegally snuck in a bunch of Shaw back into the libretto, and Marshall Saunders was in that production as well. And so Shaw has always held a very dear place for us here at Quintessence, and we were desperate to do another one. And for me, I've been thinking just so much about this idea of the human soul and like what its value is and how we think about it in the modern age, in the post-millennial age. And there's so many different opinions about what it is and if it exists. And I just love the way Shaw bandies about this idea and takes so many different perspectives on how to save one's soul, how to protect one's soul, what its relationship is to modern life. And to me, Shaw is a playwright that really, truly is not trying to tell you what to think. I think he really is trying to ask you as many questions as possible to really force you to examine what you think. And I think that that's not something that a lot of people like when they go to the theater. They want to be told something, and they want to have a kind of thesis statement. They can, go tell their friends and convince their friends who have similar thesis statements to go support the thesis statement. And what I love about Shaw in all of his works is I feel like he has his own opinions, but he also really is challenging us to really dig as deep as we can while laughing into figuring out what our viewpoints are. So I really do cherish him as one of our resident playwrights and can't wait to do more.
Please. You mentioned like all the different viewpoints that are presented in the play. It's a huge cast. It's a lot of characters. Is anybody Alex's favorite?
No, I think most of the times when this play is done, you have a much larger cast. So the Undershaft Britomart family is not doubling as all of the West Ham characters. And something that I really appreciated about this cast was their willingness to put on 2 masks or 3 or 4 masks and play the upper echelon oligarchy and also play the lower class characters to really bring out some of the more humanist aspects of Shaw's play. I always come into a play, this might sound weird, but through the heroine. That's usually what attracts me to a lot of these classic plays, and for me, Barbara definitely is one of my favorite characters of all time. And I can't think of many plays where you can fall in love with a person or a character and their faith and their purity, and then also watch them then deal with something challenging that faith and really rocking that faith, questioning it, and then still sort of participating with them, navigating that next couple steps. So to me, she was my entry point. I must admit, though, that Cousins, because Barbara loves him, was always fascinating to me, and wanting to figure out how they loved each other and why, and the thrill of Cousins' mind as a Bacchanalian or as a Dionysian, which I feel myself to be also, was really fascinating. And then ultimately, you have to appreciate Undershaft and his worldview and his philosophy, and where he comes in as the source of everything that is Barbara, and the person who gave her inheritance of her life force. So to me, the three of them are an incredible triumvirate.
Yeah.
And there aren't many plays where you have multi-generational, multi-gender, multi-class perspective on what it is to create a life force and to create change in the world.
Yeah, he steers to the end, and he needs all three of them, and that's remarkable. You don't get to see like the lights dim out on a trio. Usually there's a solo person, but this time there were three. Okay, it's a big play. Were there easy moments? Were there hard moments for you as a director? And did you know how you wanted each moment to go when you went in, or were there some things or were there moments that changed for you as you particularly, like big, as you watched them rehearse?
I was so lucky to have such an incredible cast. We're lucky to have four of them here with us. So the gift of getting to watch them create these characters and figure out who these people were on stage is never one that's set in stone before the entire process. And to figure out how Jay is Cousins versus how another actor would be is part of the thrill of the rehearsal process. And I personally felt so safe being in this room. I think the challenge we had really is Shaw's language is so specific, and the style of his language is so specific, and has to move with such rapidity, but also with such clarity in order for it to work as theater. I don't know if you fully appreciated how fast they were talking. It takes a while to get your ear to hear it, but if you slow it down at all, it's one, not funny. Two, the play becomes like a 6-hour play. And harder than Shakespeare, to cut Shaw is so hard because every thought, every line builds into the next line, and I personally can still feel all the cuts that we do have in our version, which some of them make me very sad to have lost. But I also knew that once you get past that 3-hour mark, you are begging people to keep listening.
Right.
So that was the challenge of finding in our own voices and our own bodies that lift of the Shaw, that lightness and the speed of the language. And then I just think there are some of the most beautiful turns of phrases and arguments of thought in the English language in this play. And really just making sure that we could serve that and make sure that you as an audience could really hear each of those moments was so important. And knowing that the listening ear of the audience is a little weak right now because we haven't been going to the theater as much. We're not in places where we're forced to be in live rooms with live voices speaking to us in duration, and how to trick the ear into listening as clearly as possible and structuring the language as clear as possible was a challenge, but also for me the thrill of directing a piece like this. So I think the hard part was figuring out what we had to lose, because we knew we had to lose some things, and how not to lose as much as possible.
Right. Yeah.
There are versions of this play. Recently they did it in Washington, D.C., where they cut most of the third act. So they all just kind of came on, sort of made the agreement, and then the play was over. But then you lost the larger expanse, or the question that the play leaves you with, which is, what are the repercussions? How does Barbara end up going from being a soul saver in the Salvation Army to ultimately joining this proliferation group, and what that means? So it's I'm glad that we kept as much as we did.
So you segued into what will be my last of my prefab questions. Philadelphia has for a long time been a conspicuously impoverished city in the United States. We are making headlines in the wrong way because of guns. Does this play lead us to a political stance, like how we should? So, is poverty the greatest crime, and are guns power that should be available to everybody? You decide.
Yeah, I think those are the questions that the play asks us. One of the beautiful sequences of it, and we even cut a little bit of it during the previews, is the whole argument about what the function of fear is in all of us, and how we react to things that we're scared of in ways that are not humane or responsible or not to the benefit of society. And I think one of Shaw's more profound arguments is that it's really our fear of poverty and of not having enough money and of not having security that makes us do a lot of awful things that are petty crimes up to the level of murder, up to the level of international warfare, largely out of ignorance. And I love the way he challenges us as a society and as a people to think about how we are enabling a system which is inherently suppressing or putting people in positions of poverty and not creating opportunities for them to escape those positions of poverty. And in the mouth of one of the most complicated characters in all of English theater, Andrew Undershaft, he's at one point saying, annihilate the poor masses, and at another second he's saying, those are the people that, if they're given the hope and the opportunity, will be standing beside us as brothers and sisters. But you have to give them the opportunity so that they can find the erudition, find the support systems, remove themselves from the 7 deadly sins. And I find that to be a very powerful idea. As a political person, I think it is a political piece of theater, and I think it's really challenging us to really think about how much do we have to overturn the systems that exist in order to ensure that the people that we call fellow citizens have the opportunities to escape poverty without putting them into jail, without putting them into economies or trades that are not going to ultimately support them or sustain them.
Where they have to come to a shelter to beg and for like the merest.
Yes.
So what are, for people who have been here for 3 hours, what are what questions do you have for Alex?
Just two, if you could talk a little bit about the intro, the beginning,
Yes.
out in the lobby, why,
Mhm.
and did you feel it was successful in what it was supposed to do? And I love your set. Can you talk about this wonderful set and how you came to?
Definitely. Yes. So the play, if you were to buy the play, it traditionally starts with the scene with Lady Britomart and her son Stephen in the drawing room. And Shaw wrote the prologue, which was the earlier scenes that you saw, when he was asked to write a screenplay for the story. And he felt it was necessary to show you a little bit more of the backstory, and specifically the moment that Cousins meets Barbara. And I've always been so struck by that piece of text, but I also knew that I didn't want the show to be over 3 hours. And I love when you can force an audience not to think of there being a barrier between the artifice of theater and the realities of life. So in my fantasy, the audience would be getting their tickets and just walking in. Cousins would be giving a speech, and then Barbara would be giving her speech, and they'd be trying to win you over. And then, without even noticing it, you'd be brought through the streets of London into our play. I also love the fact that the bus that runs outside of the theater is the 23 bus. And the play is the 23 tram. Wonderful. We even thought of, could we get everyone out on Turtle Tram? We knew that was not going to go over well. So, and I also personally love the relationship that I have to a piece of theater when I'm not seated, and to watch an actor and hear a story. So the hope was also that it would make you think about just how you listen to stories and meet people and engage and you're comfortable being an audience member. And we've only had one other person, I think, put their hand up for Barbara the whole time, and that was River, who's a 9-year-old, who's the son of our production manager. So I always hope that other people will put their hands up for Barbara's sake, but we haven't had that yet. And that was a similar effort with the hymn happening during the Salvation Army transition, was not allowing the audience to kind of leave it. Traditionally in the opera format, they would just bring the lights up a little bit and say, all right, you have 5 minutes to go to the bathroom if you want. The hope was to kind of keep you in the spirit of it. This is actually my favorite format of specifically debate theater, which this is a debate play. Some people call it tennis court, some people call it runway. I love it because no matter what you do, you always have to deal with the fact that there's an audience, and you can't ever forget that there are other people watching. And I love the fact that you literally see the audience going like this as the debates are happening, which I just think is, I love tennis, so it's like being in a tennis match. And I just love the fact that you'll see somebody, like today a woman laughed over here when Barbara said, cursed God and said, why have you forsaken me, Lord? And she laughed. And her husband and 3 other people looked up at her like, what are you I just love that this format of theater gives people that kind of permission in an interesting way. It becomes a civic event as opposed to just a passive fourth wall for me. So that's what I try for. But I have been surprised by how weary people are, and that has been really interesting to me.
I really wanted to put my hand up, but I was afraid to do it.
Okay.
I wanted to do it.
It would have been a very different play.
Okay. Oh, are you putting your hand up for a?
Outside.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
When Barbara was, and my name is Barbara also, so I wanted to be there for her.
It was all. This was all for you. You have a question?
I had a question. I guess what the under chef character mentioned, he didn't want to be a slave. I flashed to this as being an all African American cast. Would it work?
It would be interesting. It would
Yeah.
have a lot of very different repercussions.
Yeah, and undertones. I thought,
Yeah, I feel like it would be. For me, if I was going to explore that, I'd probably set it in either in South Africa, in Johannesburg, or set it in one of the English or Dutch colonies. Or Ghana would be interesting. Just to give it a context for that setup. But yeah, that would be fascinating.
How when this was first presented, when Shaw first presented this, how was it received in terms of the political nature of it, and how much of an impact did it make?
Well, Shaw spent a lot of his career fighting for his reputation. He was a much more celebrated critic at first than he was an actual playwright, and he perceived himself to be as good as Shakespeare and said it a number of times. This play opened what was then the Royal Court Theatre, which was the theatre where the most exciting sort of contemporary work at that time was happening. So the audiences were going to see the best actors doing these very challenging plays. There were people, if you read the reviews, they were not necessarily positive. There were actually a lot of similar comments made in our reviews as the original production, which is funny. People were concerned about laughing at the power and the class in the play. People were concerned about what Shaw was actually trying to say about the industrial complex. And some people felt he was relieving government of the responsibility or burden of its genocide or warfare. And then a lot of people felt like it was too long. So I feel like that's a funny thing. Audiences in theater have always questioned the duration, the purpose of length. So
You wonder what those same people said in Man and Superman.
right, yeah.
5 hours. More questions.
When was this play released relative to world events and world wars?
So this was first written and then performed in 1904, 1905. And that was one of my challenges with it, in trying to put it into a more late 20th century aesthetic in some of the clothing, because it's I do think Shaw would have made some different arguments, or would have refined his arguments post World War II and post the atomic bomb. It just kind of changes it a little bit. I think. I don't think he needs to rewrite massive sections, but I think he would have commented on it.
It was so powerful to hear it in the current situation, in the Middle East especially.
Yeah.
And Ukraine.
Yes.
It was so present with me.
Real bombs falling on
Yeah,
real soldiers and
Yeah.
real non-soldiers.
yeah.
And we wanted to the munitions factory that's building most of the shells for the bombs that are going to the Ukraine is in Scranton. So I had an impulse to try and get us to go visit it, but we couldn't get clearance.
I would trust you.
A group of actors. I mean, I feel like someone would just be sitting on it, right?
Is this typical of Shaw to have this sort of deep philosophy and humor, which is what impressed me the most about this? It was very serious, very philosophical, worldview, war, peace, good, evil, and ha-ha.
Yes, that to me
And I
is
think
the
you did it
essence of Shaw, for me personally. And he had a number of different styles of plays. He went through eras of his own, and he went through periods where his plays were more philosophical or political, and the comedy took a backseat. And then I do think all of his plays that are considered to be comedies are his most profound and most successful. And he never loses the humor, no matter how dark the subject matter.
And would you consider this a comedy?
I would, 100%. That's people who said, "Oh, Alex, you're doing another very dark season. There's no comedy," and I was like, "Major Barbara's a comedy."
And I think it's easy to lose that
Yes.
it is a comedy.
Yeah.
And I think you have to keep that in mind. I mean, I did as a member of the audience that a lot of it is ironic, funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a morality play. And I think
Right.
that's the power of it.
Yes. And I really did struggle because I really did almost want to have a marriage at the end just to nail in the role of the comedy, but we get close.
Are you all open for questions if people have questions for you? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, just putting you in the line of fire,
The
so.
one other thing I just wanted to say in this context was what I also realized along the lines of it being a comedy is what a number of people asked me what I thought the fourth act of this play would be. So what happens after the end? I've been fascinated in how, for me personally, I actually do think that Quintessence and Barbara are not just capitulating and taking over the family business, but are actually going to wrestle with the implications of their newfound role. And that to me is why I've always thought of the play as a revolutionary play, and one that I've, as a young person, have always championed. But a number of people I was shocked to find really think that they're just, becoming the next Andrew Undershaft, and they're going to just keep the system running, which to me is so cynical and not my perspective. So I was curious if anyone had any.
I think it's like 50-50, like whether they go one way or the other. I mean, practical, your own experience says they're going to become like Undershaft, but then it's possible that they'll do something revolutionary and not be creating bombs or doing like what the Jewish workers in the Holocaust did and sabotage the war, war machine.
Can I ask Cousins? So, did you sell out? Or
Didn't sell out, I bought in.
you bought it? Very good. What do you have a sense of how you, as the next Andrew Undershaft, would change the business? Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. I was actually having a conversation with my parents are in town, so they actually saw the show yesterday. And they had asked me, so what happens afterward? And I said, well, it all depends. If I had a good show, me and Barbara are gonna make it. You know, we are going to start a revolution. If I have a bad show, gonna end up just like Andrew. So really, it varies from day to day.
Reliant, yes, please.
I just have to observe, in light of the question, you do finish with a red light from above on the hand of Undershaft covering the hands of the lovers, which does seem to come down on one side rather than the other, which I think is, you know, that's certainly a choice, and it's probably borne out in history. You know, surely. Put the guns in the hands of the poor and the oppressed if you want them to free themselves. And I think, I'm paraphrasing one of the statements on the factory wall, but then those people then become the oppressors themselves. And I've not read Marx, but I do know that history is a cycle, is something that has been said. So I will finish by saying I thought it was fantastic.
It was.
Is there like a last, is there a burning desire? Wait,
He was, he had his hand.
all right,
Thank you.
who's that masked person?
First of all, this was absolutely incredible. I have to thank every one of you for this experience. I'm curious if I can ask a question to Mr. Parente, is it?
Yes.
I always find the performance of, I don't want to say the villain, because I don't know quite that there is one or who it is, if there is, so interesting. Weirdly enough, whenever I blinked for a moment, I thought I was hearing Derek Jacobi when you were speaking. There was something of an interesting vocal similarity. I'm wondering, how do you, as the person who could be seen as the negative or cooling force on these more, on like a more naive character, how do you keep that charm and that ability to still be engaged with and liked by members of the audience? Is it like from the humor that's already in the script, or did you have to think about like how far to go in one direction or the other?
Well, there are a couple of answers there. So my impulse was really play what's in the script. Shaw gives you everything. I just have to say the lines. You don't have to create this whole character. However, in rehearsal, Alex was very specific about how he thought it should go, and he was pushing me to go darker with a lot of those really big speeches. I probably tended to be a little bit more going more towards the charm. But, you know, for me, it was a balance. And I think ultimately it is really believing that argument about poverty is the biggest evil, and that we have to empower people.
Thank you.
Yeah, did I answer it?
Oh, more than, thank you.
So you like debate plays, and you like this and this format for it, and you also got more laughs out of No Exit than I thought I ever thought were there, but there were. So, is Alex the Shaw director and Alex the Sartre director, are they the same? The same guy? How did you shift those gears? And if you haven't seen No Exit, you have to come back for No Exit.
Yes, no, they're both very much me, very much different sides of me. I actually have found such joy having the French in my brain while working on Shaw and vice versa, and really hearing the debates that were happening in No Exit that I might not have been as attuned to. And also both plays entering into levels of darkness where, for me, whenever that happens, laughter is where I find my soul. But I grew up in a very complicated family. My aunt's right over there, and even in the worst of moments, it's a very Irish family. It is nothing but laughter, even in the most profound pain and darkness. So to me, that's me, and then I think Shaw feels the same way, and I frankly think Sartre does too. So it was lovely to use art to explore that.
And also congratulations to the Hebrew phrase Yeshar Koach on your own translation of no exit.
Thank you.
That's something, I don't know what kind of summer you had. All right,
It was a good one.
yeah, okay. So lest people think that no exit is being taken literally, I think we should let people go.
Yes.
But thank you.